Is there a difference between liberals and progressives on the left? You might be surprised to learn that true liberals actually have more in common with conservatives than they do with the progressive left. We're talking about that and so much more with Dennis Prager next on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to Significant Insights. Today, I'm talking about the principles of liberty, free speech, and the differences between conservatives, liberals, and the progressive left. My guest today is Dennis Prager. Dennis is a national radio talk show host. He is also a best-selling author. His latest writing project is a multi-volume commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible. The Rational Bible on Genesis and Exodus has already been completed. Dennis is also the co-founder of the educational media site PragerU. He recently has had to sue Google and YouTube over their restrictions of some of his PragerU videos, which is part of our discussion on free speech today. I want to talk to you first about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and just liberty in general. First of all, give me your take on the First Amendment and what's happening in cities across the country right now, because it's pretty much being explained to us as First Amendment rights.
The most important of human liberties, I believe, is freedom of speech. If you cannot say what you think, then what freedom matters? I'm a deeply religious man, and I actually fear curbs on free speech even more than on religious freedom, which I do fear a great deal and which already has taken place, wherein liquor stores seem to be essential business, but churches are not. But it's all about free speech. The human being bereft of the ability to say, to write what he or she thinks, then we are rendered essentially biological creatures that eat and drink and sleep, and that's it. It's like the left would defend Castro, and they would say, well, in Cuba, there's a 99% literacy rate. This is all of my life I heard that. And I've always said, what is the good of literacy if you can only read what the Communist Party allows you to read? I'd rather be illiterate with freedom than literate without freedom. But the left doesn't cherish freedom, so no wonder they would adulate Castro. This is the first time in American history, and that's an amazing thing, because you think everything is precedented, but it's not true. This is unprecedented. The threat to free speech in America on the college campus, at high schools, all through the United States. You're quote unquote canceled by the left if you speak your mind. And go on.
It's interesting you mentioned Castro. And when Castro was in the process of overthrowing the country, all of his promises were freedom of speech. It was to be a utopia. But that was never really their intention. And as I think of some of the things that are happening today among the radical left, I see the same pattern. Dennis, do you see? I assume you see that same pattern.
Well, you see, it's very frustrating. It's very saddening. It's even angering to me. The combination of ignorance and willful forgetfulness. There is no example, and I have studied the left. That was my academic field. I was at the Russian Institute at Columbia University. I studied communist affairs under Zbigniew Brzezinski, the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter. So this has been my whole life. I learned Russian in order to read Pravda, the Communist Party newspaper. So maybe I'm just more aware than others, but everybody should be aware of this fact. There is no example in history of the left taking power and people being free. Liberals love freedom. Leftists loathe freedom. That's why I never use the term far left. There's no such thing as far left. There's left, liberal, center, right. That's what exists.
So how do you define the difference between liberal and left? Because
I can give you, I give 6 examples in a 5-minute video at PragerU. I hope your viewers watch that. Differences between liberal and left. I'll just give you very quickly a couple. One is on race, and I made this video a year ago, before the current racial tensions, and liberalism believes in racial integration, and leftism doesn't. Leftism believes in segregation. The leftist view of blacks and the KKK view of blacks are essentially identical. They are different. They are inherently different human beings. That's the Ku Klux Klan view of blacks. That was Hitler's view of blacks. That is the left's view of blacks. Therefore, a black dorm, which was anathema to a liberal who wanted an integrated dorm, is a beautiful thing when Harvard and other universities build black dormitories. I find that repulsive. It goes against everything I was raised as a liberal Jew to believe in. But liberals are weak, so they don't confront the left. But they share nothing except big government. They share nothing. But liberals are largely cowards, and they don't fight the left. Alan Dershowitz is an example of a liberal who fought the left and has lost all his friends, because that's what they do to you. Another example: liberalism always celebrated capitalism. Liberals were all capitalists. They knew capitalism is the only way to create wealth for anybody, not the left. The left loathes capitalism. It always loathed capitalism. The liberal venerated the Judeo-Christian traditions of America. The left loathes the Judeo-Christians of America. I mean, I don't want to spend our whole time together, but I gave you 3 examples. Liberal and left have nothing in common except belief in big government.
And yet, it would appear to me that the liberal, whether you call it liberal left or whatever you call it, that the liberals are encouraging the things that are happening from the radical left, such as the protests, the riots that are being encouraged.
Well, I said liberals are cowards. That's the reason. Liberals are as dangerous as leftists, not because of what they believe, but because of the way they vote. They vote left because they have been indoctrinated into believing that their enemy is the right. The enemy of liberalism is not conservatism. The enemy of liberalism is leftism.
But it's also interesting that one of the things that we keep hearing from the left, from the Democrats, is protection of free speech, as if under a conservative administration that we will lose free speech. But it appears to me that it's the exact opposite that's true. That it doesn't appear to me that there is a serious interest for First Amendment rights or for free speech from the liberals or the radical left, because it's a biased speech. It's our speech, but not your speech.
I don't know of an example of conservative suppression of free speech. There may be, I just don't know of any. There are, if you want to call Hitler a conservative, which, would be just dishonest. People say he's right-wing. People say he's left-wing because Nazism means National Socialism. It's not a debate I get into. But in American history, there is no example that I know of conservatives doing to free speech what the left is doing to it today. There was a man named Eugene Genovese who was a Marxist, self-proclaimed Marxist, major historian of the Civil War era. And he wrote a piece in the New Republic years ago in which he said that when in the 50s, I don't know if he's still with us, I hope he is, but he said in the 50s, as a Marxist on a campus where there were many at the time still conservatives, he had total free speech. Said, but once the Marxists took over the universities, there's no free speech for the conservatives. And this was a Marxist speaking.
We'll have more with Dennis Prager, including what happened during a Senate subcommittee hearing over his banned videos. You'll hear a truly astounding statement made by a Google executive about the 10 Commandments. That and more about free speech and liberty with author and radio host Dennis Prager, right after the break.
Look, something has to be done. You can't have three companies control virtually all internet information and work on behalf of the Democratic Party and the left. That's not tenable. Something has to happen.
Welcome back. Today, my guest is best-selling author and nationally syndicated radio host Dennis Prager. Dennis is also the founder of PragerU. It's an online archive of short and long-form videos, interviews, and presentations that offer thoughtful analysis on the issues of the day from experts and thought leaders. I'm talking with Dennis about what's happening to free speech in the United States today. Now, let's go back to freedom of speech, and especially with the liberal-controlled media today. Some of your own PragerU videos have been taken off of YouTube, Facebook. Tell me about that and what you're doing about it, because it seems to be a pattern with conservative viewpoint. Totally the opposite of freedom of speech.
We have 400 something videos up. We have many things aside from the 5-minute videos, but the essential PragerU project is a video a week and been for a number of years. They're 5-minute videos. They have over 1 billion views a year. 65% of those who view it are under 35 years of age. So we're a big threat to the left because we change minds. And 100 of our 400 are on the restricted list by YouTube, which is owned by Google, meaning that if you filter out pornography and violence, you can't see that video, schools can't see it, and libraries can't see it. I testified on this in the Senate, at a Senate subcommittee, invited by Ted Cruz, to his great credit. He looked at the man from Google. This is on YouTube. People could watch this. Do Dennis Prager Senate hearing. I'm sure you'll find it. So Senator Cruz asked the man from Google, "Sir, could you explain why you put Mr. Prager's video on the 10 Commandments on the restricted list?" And without any sense of irony or humor or absurdity? He said, because it contains the word murder. So when it was my turn to speak, I said, Senator, we will now at PragerU produce a Google-friendly video, The 9 Commandments. We will remove thou shalt not murder because it offends Google. We don't want children to hear thou shalt not murder. So it gives you an idea of the absurdity. It's mostly politically oriented. That was just an example of sheer absurdity. Give you another example. Doctors stood in Washington a few weeks ago, all doctors, all medical doctors. Then they were in Washington and they spoke about the many things, the need to open up schools. It's very bad for children not to have school again. It's more damaging to children not to have school than to go to school. They spoke about hydroxychloroquine and zinc, how helpful that could be, and a whole host of other issues. These are doctors. 17 million people, I think, saw it within hours. I think it went the most viral video of all time. I mean, there were videos, obviously, with more viewers, but not in such a concentrated amount of time. It was immediately dropped by Facebook and Twitter. We at PragerU tweeted out. All we did is retweet the video. We were removed from Twitter for a week just for sending out doctors speaking their minds on medical issues. So this, by the way, this notion of the left follow the science is one of their many lies. They don't follow the science. They follow scientists they agree with. Science is irrelevant. So what are we doing? We sued Google. We lost the first 2 cases before judges. We're not shocked. It's in California. We hope to go to the Supreme Court. Look, something has to be done. You can't have 3 companies control virtually all internet information and work on behalf of the Democratic Party and the left. That's not tenable. Something has to happen. And this notion that, well, it's free, it's, there's private companies, they could do what they want. That's not what they were signed up to do. They were signed up not to interfere. If you do interfere, then you should be liable for lawsuits, because then you're a publisher. I don't want to get too involved, but they want their cake and eat it. They want no lawsuits available because they allow everything, and then they don't allow everything and no lawsuits. I don't want lawsuits, but the argument that they can do what they want because they're private industry, what I always give one example, and with this I'll conclude. If American, Delta, and United announced anybody reading the Wall Street Journal cannot fly on our airline, what would we say? They're private companies, right? Why can't they restrict? Would people allow it? And if not, why not? The people who argue, like libertarians, who unfortunately are true believers, they often make great points, and they often just sound foolish. They're gung-ho defenders of Google suppressing free speech because they're private companies. So I'd like to ask these people, if the airlines decided only conservatives are barred from flying, would you say okay?
Yeah. The president had recently did a tweet basically saying that it's okay for kids to go back to school because there are almost no children who have COVID-19. That, as I recall, that Twitter was suspended. It was canceled, and he was suspended for a period of time. At the same time, Holocaust deniers, the president's statement was a subjective statement. The Holocaust deniers, according to Zuckerberg, that's a freedom of speech matter, and they can stay on. They can deny the Holocaust, and those are facts. I mean, those are things that are documented. The Holocaust is a documented occurrence. That's the kind of thing, it seems to me, Dennis, that we're running into. The political correctness issue has gotten to the point that it's no longer what you can't say. It's even now an attempt to force you to say certain use certain language and to say certain phrases, especially in the gender issues. Um, and this is part of what's happened to you, but it even goes beyond that.
Well, you will probably be banned from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, which is owned by Google, if you say that men do not menstruate.
Well, I just read an article about a woman in England who owned a beauty salon, and she put an ad for another operator. And in the ad, she said, we want happy people." She got a response back that said, "You can't use happy because that's discriminatory, because someone may apply who would not consider themselves happy. So we can't run your ad with that kind of language."
Well, it I did not hear of that, and I stay abreast of these things, but it's not possible to keep up with all the totalitarianism on the left. I got to look that one up because that verifies a theory of mine, and that is that happiness is in itself an anti-left position. There are no happy leftists. I've written a book on happiness. I have lectured on this on all 7 continents, even Antarctica, and I am somewhat of a maven on happiness. I do a happiness hour. I've done one hour a week of my radio show for 20 years on happiness. So I've spoken to millions of people about it all over the world. There are no happy leftists. There are happy and unhappy liberals. There are happy and unhappy conservatives. Every leftist is angry and unhappy. So they're very sensitive to restricting anything to the happy because that would disqualify them.
As Dennis mentioned, he has written on the subject of happiness. His book, Happiness is a Serious Problem, while written a number of years ago, is still available through online retailers. His most recent books are the Rational Bible series on Genesis and Exodus, and you can also listen to Dennis' daily radio program through DennisPrager.com. PragerU videos are available online at PragerU.com. Final thoughts on the value of freedom right after the break.
People do not yearn to be free. It's a common, stupid misconception. People yearn to be taken care of. They will trade being taken care of for freedom in a nanosecond.
The right to speak freely in our country is something we should never take for granted. It's a right that has been given to us by the First Amendment to our Constitution. Yet, it's under attack. Many of Dennis Prager's videos have been removed from YouTube, including one on the Ten Commandments. Everyone in our country loses when any group is silenced. In today's Final Thoughts, Dennis talks about the value of liberty and how easy it is for human beings to give this value away. One final question. At this point in time, how can we get it back? Can we get it back, or Dennis, are we past the tipping point?
We're past the tipping point in journalism and in academia, including kindergarten. Parents need to take their kids out of schools. Most schools, anyway. Unless you want your kid to have a drag queen reading hour and learn that America was founded in 1619 and is a racist, vile society, and Washington was a bad human being. If you want your kid to learn that, send your kid to school, private or public. Doesn't almost any longer matter. But this election, if the left wins, which means if Biden wins, I don't care if Biden, what he personally is, it's irrelevant. If they win, it's tough to see how you can gain back freedom when a society has voted to lose it. Liberty is a value, not an instinct.
What do you mean it's a value? And how important is that value?
It's a value. People do not yearn to be free. It's a common, stupid misconception. People yearn to be taken care of. They will trade being taken care of for freedom in a nanosecond. I have 2 volumes of my 5-volume commentary on the Bible out. It's called The Rational Bible. I know biblical Hebrew real well, so I've been teaching it all of my life. When the Israelites left Egypt, they complained, we want to go back. They preferred better food to freedom. Nothing's changed.
Dennis, thank you very much. I really appreciate this time, and
Pleasure to be with you, Jerry. Thank you.
We may be knocking on your door again in the near future to get some more answers and have more discussion. But thank you for today. I deeply appreciate it.
My pleasure again.
You know, freedom of speech is especially important to those of us who are people of faith. We want to share our faith. We want to speak it aloud. We want to write about it. We want to distribute the writings of the gospel to the public, to people everywhere, all over the world. But we will lose our freedoms to do that if we don't have the willingness to work to preserve them. And there's a number of ways we can do that, but one of the ways, we still have a right to make our voices heard through the voting booth. We're facing an election. Vote your values. Forget the parties, vote your values. To see this interview again or watch other Significant Insights programs, you can find them on YouTube by searching under Total Living Network. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. See you next time on Significant Insights.